So we're here to talk through this Windows variation of across the streams puzzle. We've had a lot of these Windows variants in the last month or so since Prasanna wrote a whole week of them. Again, the fact that the shading in this group is opposite the shading of this group, and in across the streams puzzles, things like the 2x2 shading rules come into play. There'll be a fair amount of interesting connectivity in these groups. We can't really start there, but we'll do something I do whenever I start across the streams puzzle, which is just sort of go through the rows and columns and mark clues that jump out as very interesting to me. And there are these 5. The things I'm looking for are either groups that have a whole lot of clues, particularly clues that are of a size that fill a whole column. This is the easiest of all the clues to spot as relevant, and anyone that's looking at the grid probably makes as their first step marking this, since it is actually fully specified. The clues on this side, why these rows sort of seem things worth thinking about early on, is just because of the large size of those numbers. Because of the 6 clue, you can actually know that the 6th group, wherever it sits, is going to use these 2 cells looking across. We can't say much yet about the 5, but it's going to need a large shaded segment to come in here, and potentially after we mark one of these cells as unused, we'll be able to force this side of the grid. If, say, this were unused, we know that these 4 cells are shaded because there's this range of 6 cells and the 5 has to sit within them. Something like that is what you're thinking about. The least common but most critical kind of clue, if you haven't learned to spot these yet, are these single question marks. They're somewhat rare, but they mean that there is at most, there's exactly one shaded group in this whole space. So anytime I shade a single cell, say a cell like this, every other shaded cell must connect to that cell. If you actually mark a cell as unused, it's going to have a pretty long reach to the other edge of the grid, and that's going to be able to, in a puzzle like this, probably have a lot of large constraints. So how does this work out in practice? Well, we shaded this whole column. Every time you shade a column, particularly on a border, look at the leftmost, in this case, clues. The 2 clue here is the only one that's specified on the left border, but we can fill it in, get to a space like this. I guess having marked this as unshaded, we can mark that cell as shaded. Seeing that these have to be connected to the rest of the group, let's just say at least one of these 2 cells is shaded. My notation will be something like a circle, which says to fill in. That's the opposite of an X, which is unused. We can actually say that in the same way one of these is shaded, the other cell has to be unshaded, and that's if both were shaded, you get a 2x2 region here. So on this side, there's the opposite. Whichever cell is shaded is not, and whichever is unshaded is shaded. But we commented before about how this question mark meant the shaded cells had to sit together. So the shaded has to be on the top, the unshaded is on the bottom, and that also then forces every other cell beneath it to be unshaded. We've hit this marked cell. We knew this was an important row, and it turns out now we can mark this unused, all the cells to the right. There are 6 cells here that could be shaded for the 5 group, but with the leftmost already used, there's only this one option to get an intact shading of just 5 cells. We've done a lot of progress here. You'll often sort of scan the other direction, see if there's something of value yet. There really isn't. We know that the 2 group that's vertical will be coming from this cell, but right now there's not much more to do there. But we should take the progress from this window to the other window, and so that says that this cell is unshaded. These 3 cells are shaded, so it actually gives us the whole 6. The rest of this is unused. We've put a unshaded cell into these 2 important columns. This is the first one we can really look at. Everything above it has to be unshaded because, again, this single group can't reach on top of it. That breaks off this whole corner quite quickly. We can now use a lot of the top clues coming this way. The top row needs to have 2 more groups in it. With 3 cells left over, that's going to be a pattern which is shade, unshade, shade. The second row we could also say needs 4 contiguous shaded groups. That's here. We'll propagate the unshaded down below. Not much we're going to do with the asterisk clues, so I think it's these two cells we just marked that are the next to work from. Got a 2, 3. The 2 has to be the first group, so it couldn't be in that cell. Having marked the 2, where does the 3 long sit? It can't sit. Using the rightmost cell, it has to use those. Get that group in. We're still not getting ways to use many numbers. Actually, there are no more vertical numbers to use, and there are very few digits here. I guess we can at least start saying something about this 3 now. It sits right next to a row with a ton of shaded cells, so the 3 can't start in any of these spaces. At most it starts here, and the range that it sits, we know that the 3 going this way is going to sit in that cell. This whole puzzle is starting to shape up like it's breaking into little groups. You'll see that this group needs to extend up to stay connected. That now triggers the 1 clue. It's going to go up 1 more cell to stay connected again. Now we have a connectivity question over here, and the reason for it is seeing that this cell that we've marked from the 3 needs to connect into the cells already shaded in this column. If both of these are not shaded, there's no way for that to happen, so at least one of them is shaded. If at least one of them is shaded but it's in a single group, at least the bottommost is shaded. After we shade that, we see that we also have to shade the top one or the whole thing won't be connected. This now has to connect over. So this is the intact 3. This strands the whole side of the puzzle. Here, this now finally gets triggered. It needs to be shaded at least once and needs to stay connected. So it comes over like so. This is finishing out the window clue over here. We need to have these be a connected group, so we need to shade one of those cells. We can't immediately say which if we just look at this column. Right now it has 3 distinct groups. If we shaded in this group, it would come down to 2, but we could use this cell and get a 3rd. This is the important column to look at. This is at most 1 group, which means these have to be distinct groups like this. That now actually forces us, as I said, to get a 3rd group down below. It comes like this. We have 2 groups in the bottom row. This needs to be connected with 2. And we finish this puzzle, which, like many cross-the-streams puzzles, starts from looking at extreme clues and figuring out how they'll work together. And then in the middle game had a lot of interesting interplay of the 2 windows where we, I think, went back and forth 2 or 3 times to get the quick progress. Hope you learned something about these puzzles, and we'll see you again soon.